Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. Welcome to this Box webinar. Appreciate you all being here. We'll just wait another minute or so for everybody else to join, and then we'll get started. Appreciate you guys being here. Also, as a reminder, there is a handout. I might forget to say it later, so I'll say it now. There's a handout here, which is a copy of the slides in PDF form. So please feel free to grab that file if you want to reference it for later. There's a couple parts that I think might be really useful near the end of the deck, but it's really the big part of our conversation here that Frank and I are going to have. It's those steps that we go through in the technologies as well. So might want to grab that. Okay, I think we are ready to go. So welcome everybody. Appreciate you being here for this webinar. We're looking forward to talking with you about these details. We're going to get into some really interesting technical details. We presented a webinar, I think it was last month, on 3 simple steps for manufacturers to get a quick win with real-time data, just how to kind of connect with systems and whatnot. It was at the high level, conceptual level, and we talked about architecture as well. This time, at the very end of that session, off the cuff, I thought, well, maybe we should get in and do some real technical details. So that's what we're going to do. So we have Frank here with us. He's one of our senior IoT engineers, and we're going to talk about how to get data from a Siemens PLC step by step. And I guess in some places, I updated the title here to say with unified namespace, but I didn't update it on this page. With unified namespace, step by step. So what we're going to do is to go through the first 4 steps for digital transformation, or first 4 sub-steps within the first major step of a digital transformation, which is to connect, collect, store, and visualize, and then several steps after that. But we're just going to cover those 4 steps, and we're going to use a Siemens S7 1200 PLC. We're going to use some other technologies as well, including the KEP Server EX tool from Kepware, HiByte, which is a really nice data ops tool, HiveMQ as our MQTT data broker, Ignition from Inductive Automation, which is a really nice industrial MES and SCADA development platform, and also Canary Labs, a historian and visualization tool. So with that, I'm going to go through a few high-level details here. So make sure I grab my notes, make sure I'm ready, and then we'll get into it. So as a company, very quickly, we are a manufacturing intelligence solutions company. We focus on helping companies operate more efficiently and grow. And we do that by connecting to the machines, the data systems, and the people in the organization, and connect all that data together. Really what we're about is connecting everything and everyone without vendor lock-in. That's a lot of the work we do here, as well as some other companies. We really focus on creating that single version of the truth. We use a lot of open technologies, and we like to think about the digital strategies that companies have to make sure that they have that plus minimum technical requirements and a few other ideas to have those guardrails for making the right decisions going forward through their journey on that digital transformation process. I'm going to touch on a few things here very briefly. If you want more details on this, please see some of our other videos and also our prior webinar, which is available on YouTube. I'm just going to touch on these as a quick reminder. I really want to make sure that we have enough time to go through everything that we're going to talk about here. So to set the background, really, we like to talk about the fact that manufacturers have a lot of challenges in the near term. In the plant itself, the machine downtime, production throughput, all these items on the right quality, on-time delivery, et cetera. And also in the bigger picture from their industry and the regional and national and global level, there's a lot more competition. Inflation is making things pretty difficult, limited workforce, challenges with labor, supply chain, all kinds of challenges out there. And the question is, how do you deal with these challenges? It's with data. Companies don't have that visibility directly to the plant floor yet, and they need that kind of visibility. And so the idea is, you can tell I'm a big fan of the Holy Grail, the movie, and Monty Python from that image there. But for us, the Holy Grail is that we connect everything and everyone into a network, and then all layers of the business are integrated and operate based on the information, the data from all the other layers of the business. Stakeholders know what's going on in real time for the current and in the future. And with these kinds of ideas and others, we can ensure that manufacturers become data-driven manufacturers. We also talk a bit about what it is to be Industry 3.0 and moving to 4.0 and that digital transformation. Again, I recommend you definitely check out some of our other videos where we get into some of these ideas in much more detail. One of the big ideas we'll touch on here, but again, other videos in YouTube, I would recommend checking them out, is how we approach the challenge of connecting everything and everyone. And you'll see a little bit of that today in our demonstration. It's this idea of this flexible, scalable architecture called the unified namespace, named such by, again, Walker Reynolds from Intellic Integration and 4.0 Solutions. Please visit the other videos. The basic idea here is that you have a single central hub, data hub, or let's call it a single version of the truth at that center of all the data. You don't have the ERP system as the center of the world like it is in a lot of manufacturers. We move that aside to be a node in the whole ecosystem, like all the other valuable, important sources of data. And then we connect them all to the single hub over time, incrementally, not all in one big fell swoop in one big project. And then share that data across the organization and model that data using a basic structure from ISA 95 Part 2, which is enterprise, site, area, line, and cell. That becomes the model of how the plant actually operates. When we put these solutions in place, this is a very simple architectural illustration of what a pilot project might look like. A couple machines, a couple PLCs, a Groove Epic smart PLC from Opto22, inductive automation with Ignition Edge, a unified namespace, and other devices subscribing to that data via MQTT, pulling it out of the unified namespace. And that unified namespace might be made of HiveMQ or another MQTT data broker, potentially HiveByte to connect to a lot of the transactional systems, etc. A lot to think about there, even just within this pilot architecture. Again, videos are on YouTube. Once that pilot architecture really seems to work out, it starts to pay off, everybody proves the value of it, you're able to build the political capital within your organization to say, hey, everybody, this new idea works, let's push this out, let's scale it. Then you can start to get into architectures like this. But I don't want to delay anymore. Let's really get into the fun details. Quite honestly, the last webinar, I said 3 simple steps for manufacturers. Well, it's our webinar, so we have the prerogative, of course, to change to 4 steps. I changed my mind. Let's call it 4 steps. And we're going to follow again with those 4 steps of connect, collect, store, and visualize. We're going to focus on a small simulator that we have, which is a bottling line. This bottling line happens to be running in Siemens and was built in Tier Portal. This bottling line has a capper on it, and so we're pulling data from this simulator like the data tags that you can see on the right. And that's what Frank has running on his system. So we'll be switching over to his screen share here pretty soon, but we'll start off with this image. This is what he's going to build from scratch. And I should tell you, I think maybe in the descriptions of the webinar, we said it was going to be about 30 minutes. We're already about, I don't know, 10, 12 minutes into that process already with me yammering here. We're going to stop that and we're going to cut over to Frank getting into the details. But these are the basic steps that we're going to go through. He's first going to connect to the PLC, that Siemens S7 1200, using Kepware. Then from Kepware, he's going to use HiveByte to connect to Kepware to pull the data over an OPC connection. Then from HiveByte, he's going to publish that data into the HiveMQ data, HiveMQ data broker in that unified namespace that you can see here in this circle within here. And he's going to create a connection that's an actual reference to some of the tools in HiveByte, and then create a flow to get the data from from Kepware into HiveMQ. Then we're going to set up Ignition and also Canary to subscribe to that MQTT data from HiveMQ. The data then is going to be stored in the Canary Labs historian, and you'll also be able to visualize some of the data in Ignition with the perspective tools and also within the Axiom visualization tool in the Canary Labs Historian. That's a lot. We should get started real quick. So, Frank, I'm going to stop my share. If you could please start sharing, and let's get to it.
So this is a virtual machine I have running on my laptop, and as Kevin mentioned, I am connected to a Siemens S7 1200. So first thing that we will do is I'm going to open up KEP server here. The configuration software where I can set up my driver connection to my Siemens PLC. And I'm going to make a new project. I will update my runtime so that it is the active project. I will modify my OPC UA settings to allow logins. And I will add a OPC UA client. So this is, like I said, a Siemens S7 1200. KEP server has specific Siemens drivers, but to show kind of, we're not tied to a specific type of PLC or brand or anything like that. I'm just going with generic OPC UA endpoint here. So I will connect to that device without any login information or anything like that.
Yeah, for demo purposes, we're going to leave this unsecure, but obviously
mainly for time's sake, right? Security very important, but also takes additional time to set up. So I now have this active connection to my S7 1200, and I can browse that all the tags in that device. So I can see.
So you've got a live PLC set up there, and just within a few minutes here, you've been able to connect and see all the tags.
Yeah, and nice thing about KEP server, some of their drivers, like the OPC one that I'm using here, allows you to browse devices. Other ones, like their Allen Bradley drivers, you can directly import drivers as well, or import tags. So I'm gonna bring in a couple tags here, such as the heating temperature, the heating set point, the fail limit. I'll scroll back up or I guess down actually, and grab things like in feed and out feed. I think that will be good enough for now. So grab those handful of tags, hit finish. You can see that maybe I forgot to hit add. So I'll go through that process again. Sorry about that. So.
No worries. It's always fun to be live.
Limit, set point, temperature. Set point, temperature, limit. Hit OK, apply. You know what? I'm using the trial version of KEP server. Let me reinitialize my runtime.
Yes. Trial version runs for 2 hours and then shuts off. You got to restart it.
Okay, third time's the charm, right?
Now everybody has it memorized, the whole process. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's just grab the heat ones and then we can go on.
Shortcut here.
Perfect.
There we go. So there I'll have the server interfaces, bottom of the line, and my 3 tags here. So yeah, I can go ahead and launch Quick Client, which is just a shows you the active connections in KEP server, and I can see the current value of those tags. So I have a set point of 300, a fail limit of 310, and my heating temperature is ramping up. So now that we have live data coming into KEP server, I am going to go ahead and open a web browser here. I have HiByte running on this computer as well.
As you're opening up, can you go back to that image too, that you have the screenshot of the slide that I have, just a reminder. So we have gone through the first part of step one, which is, that one, connect to the PLC. Now we're going to get to connecting HiByte to Kepware and pull the data over the OPC connection. Okay.
So I will go ahead and open up HiByte here and create a connection, and I'll just call this KEP server. This is also going to be a OPC connection. As I mentioned, we're just trying to keep things generalized. HiByte can connect to a couple of different things. So we could do like, connecting to SQL databases, REST APIs, a whole host of different options. And of course, I'll be using it to output to MQTT.
Yeah, so while you're working there, a couple of thoughts on that. So we typically use MQTT and data brokers to connect to a lot of the telemetric systems, machines with data. And we can also use, if we need to, HiByte to do that as well. Often Kepware, if they have some other drivers to other systems that we can't connect to directly with MQTT, and so we use Kepware as maybe, if you will, an insulating layer or a gateway, so to speak, and HiByte can be used in a similar fashion. The real power of HiByte is where we can connect to a lot of those transactional systems, not just telemetric with machine data, but also APIs, databases, all that kind of stuff that Frank said. That's where it really becomes interesting, because we use HiByte as a data ops tool to connect to, bring the data in, model it to get the context from it, and then to get that data out to other systems.
Yeah, while Kevin was talking there, I went ahead and just used the browse option that HiByte had and added those 3 tags that I added to KEP server from the PLC. And you can see here, I can open the set point tag, read that input, and get the same value that we saw in QuickLine of 300. So I now have a active connection to KEP server, and I can see the status here that it is running. So, yes, so now we need somewhere to send this data, right? So we have HiByte collecting it. Where does it go? And we're going to send it to a MQTT data broker that I have running in the cloud. So HiveMQ offers allows you to host in the cloud. So I will punch in that URL, make sure I type in 8 3s, or 3 8s rather, for the port number.
And quickly go back to the image again too, just to make sure everybody sees where we're at in that process. So we've gone through that OPC connection for Kepware to HiByte, and now we're getting the data from HiByte, down to HiveMQ. So we're going to create a connection to enable that, and then after that we'll do a flow to actually push the data from Kepware through HiByte to HiveMQ.
And I'm going to take a small detour right now over to HiveMQ. So I'll go to my cloud session and I will log in. So I have one cluster up and running currently that we'll be using for this webinar. And that's where I got the URL from that I pasted in earlier. Definitely don't have that one memorized. I'll go ahead and manage the cluster and go into the access management. And I'm going to add a new user, just call it webinar. And this will allow HiveByte to use, I'll use this user in HiveByte to send the data to HiveMQ. So now that user is made, I can fill out this username and password.
And when you get it to a good stopping point, let me know.
Okay. And I will configure to use SSL. So I will now add a output of my heating temp, give it a group ID of Ectobox. My location is Pittsburgh.
And you're defining some of the parameters for
Correct.
the unified namespace at this point, that structure of enterprise site area line cells. So Ectobox is the enterprise site, is the edge node ID of
And
Pittsburgh.
I'll label this as bottling line. Go ahead and submit that. And I think before we set up the flow, we'll tackle that question, Kevin.
Okay, good. So far, just back to that image real quick, if you don't mind, to catch up. We we have gone through and created both of the connection from Kepler to HiveByte, and then the connection from HiveByte to HiveMQ. The next step is going to be the flow. So the question from Tyler is: does anything need to be done on the Siemens PLC side, assuming that we're using Tier Portal to create and activate the OPC UA server, or are the nodes created automatically?
Yeah, specifically to set up the OPC UA server, you have to enable that option in the program before you download it to the PLC. If that's not the case, again, Kep server has drivers, and we could, instead of going through OPC UA, be more specific and use the Siemens Ethernet driver. And I'll just quickly go through those settings and pick my 1200 device. So I could go through this way, punch in my IP address, and then it's been a while since I last modified that program, so I don't know the register locations offhand for like the heating temperature and the set point and everything. But we could, use like that type of addressing as well, like the MW and then the value for the addressing instead of going through the OPC UA server.
Awesome. Cool.
Yep.
Thank you, Frank. Let's keep going. Tyler, feel free to chat. I'll keep my eye on the chat now. Okay. You're welcome. You're welcome, Tyler.
Okay. So now we have our two connections made. So I will go ahead and create my flow. So the flow is what is actually pushing the data out to the data broker. So I'll just call this HiveMQ. I'll set my source. I'll use the input, and I will send my heating temperature.
And while you're doing that, just as a reminder to everybody, one of the big things that we like about HiveByte is that we can do a lot of modeling with the data, pulling data from multiple sources of modeling. We happen to be skipping that step because that's a whole conversation or a whole webinar in and of itself. And we welcome you to reach out to them, talk with Omar and others at HiveByte. They have a really great product.
Very much just scratching the surface of HiveByte here. All I have set up here is I'm taking that input of my heating temperature and writing it to the output that we made in the MQTT connection. I will configure it to publish only on changes. And I will make sure to enable that flow. So I have a status of OK. And what I can do is bring over a MQTT client. You can see I have it set up to, I have the wrong username and password in there. It's an old one. Update that. But I have it pointed to that same data broker in the cloud. So I can go ahead and connect to that. And I will, for ease of use, I'll just subscribe to everything. So you can see I have information coming in over that topic. So Sparkplug B, Ectobox, data, Pittsburgh, bottling line. And you go through the JSON here in the actual data. You can see my name of my KEP server, the Siemens S7-1200, the heating temperature with the timestamp and the value. And this is updating, of course, in real time. So as I go through, you can see that heating temperature change, 92, 100, 115. So every time that heating temperature changes, a new message is published to the data broker.
Okay. All right, then let's go back to the image to check our progress. So at this point, where are we going to first? We're going to ignition or to
We'll go to Canary first.
All right.
So with Canary, now that data is being published at a data broker, I can open the Canary admin tool. And I have Canary installed locally on this computer, but Canary itself can also be in the cloud like HiveMQ is.
And as a reminder, Canary is a time series or historian database with a really nice visualization tool, which you'll also see. It's a really great product and great company.
So here's my home screen for my Canary admin. I can navigate to my MQTT collector, go to my configuration tab and make a new connection. I will again call it HiveMQ. Configure it to use Sparkplug B. Change the server. Go to my notepad file here so I can copy that auto-generated string and give it my username and password that we set up. I will enable SSL again, and similarly to how we configured the MQTT client I was just looking at, here we're going to be subscribing to all Sparkplug B topics. We could narrow that down to just the Ectobox ones, just the data ones. You know, we can filter that down using these wildcards. This pound sign, of course, gives us everything underneath the Sparkplug B. We can do some other things like a plus to act like a wildcard for a specific level. You can get pretty fancy with the topic path. I will change this data set prefix. This is where Canary is going to store the information. So I made a data set called webinar, and I set it to automatically log the tags.
We're going through this. If anybody has any questions, please throw them into the chat. We'd love to answer them.
So I now have that all set up. I can.
So you've set up the collector to be able to subscribe to the data, so it can pull the data down.
So I can go ahead and enable that connection. You can see that connection becomes true, and I am now subscribed to the one tag I am sending currently, which is just the heating temperature. We can add more as well.
Great.
So I can navigate back to my configuration screen and see the tags for that connection. And I have that full path here of Sparkplug B, Ectobox, the plus, like I was saying, to get to the, in place of the D data that we saw in the other client, Pittsburgh, bottling line, the whole way. And if I want to see the actual values, I can go to the historian here. And I have my webinar data set. And I can see values coming in. So I got 272 not too long ago.
So this data is coming in and being stored, actually being stored in the historian now.
No, this is actually
awesome.
This is the one I want. So you can see, data coming in and being stored in Canary. And from there, Kevin, you mentioned Axiom, which is their visualization tool.
Yep.
So I can navigate back to my web browser. I have Axiom bookmarked here. It will prompt me to log in. And I can go ahead and make a new chart. Add a trend. And I have that webinar, Ectobox, Pittsburgh, bottling line, and that full tag path down to the heating temperature. Hit add and close.
So you've created essentially a canvas, and you've connected that canvas to the data source, which is that tag.
Yes, I'm just going through and modifying my scale here. Make it static.
Yep.
Go from 50 to 350.
So you're setting up some attributes of the report itself to give you a better display.
And
so
now
it makes
we
more
can.
Sense.
Yep, we can see that heating temperature come in real time. So it was at 80. And every time we get a new message, this screen updates with that. And this is all coming from the historian. So if I let this run overnight, I could come back tomorrow morning and see, how the heater ran overnight.
So this data is coming from the PLC. I have to look at the image. From the PLC into Kepware, HiByte's grabbing it from Kepware via OPC UA, HiByte publishing to HiveMQ via MQTT Sparkplug B, then Canary is subscribing to that MQTT Sparkplug B data, historizing it, and then Axiom is picking it up from the historian, from the database.
Correct. Yep. So
and so far we've done all of that in about 30 minutes. So okay, cool.
The next I was just going to say, the data is entering Canary, Canary's historizing it, and then Axiom is pulling that historian to display the data.
Yep. Awesome. Great. And one note for this historian, the Axiom has a lot more capabilities than simply this pen chart. There's a lot of other capabilities, and really, just based on what Frank did already, you can see it was pretty easy to.
Yeah, we won't get into too much detail here, but I'll take a brief sidetrack. They have this whole application. Right. So that was a chart, but you can also make applications and essentially create dashboards. And you can see some of the controls that were here on the side. I can bring in gauges and charts and date time pickers and a whole bunch of different tools to make some pretty unique and nice dashboards.
Yep. Yeah. And as development tools go these days, it's WYSIWYG, which is what you see is what you get. You put it on the screen, you can play with it, you can see the data. Design time and runtime works well. Okay. Let's take a look at Ignition.
So I'll open a new tab here, go to my Ignition Gateway homepage. I'll go to the Configure tab and log in. And I have the third-party MQTT modules from CirrusLink already installed and running. So I can go ahead to my MQTT engine, which allows you to connect to MQTT data brokers. So I'll go ahead and go over to the servers tab here, create a new MQTT connection, and I'll call it HiveMQ. A little bit different with the URL since we're using a SSL connection instead of the traditional TCP that I've been using. I'm going to change that to SSL and copy the address for my data broker that is hosted in the cloud, HiveMQ. Give it the username webinar we've been using, as well as enter my password. Don't need to worry about any certificates or anything like that for this demonstration. Again, at a production environment we would, but not just for a demonstration like this. So you can see that we are currently connected to that data broker. So now what I can do is minimize my web browser and open the Ignition Designer. And with the Ignition Designer, I'll be able to open make a new project and use that heating temperature tag that we're publishing from HiVite to use on graphics and different displays. And I'll be working in the perspective module of Ignition, their newer visualization platform that is HTML5 based. So just going through and connecting to the local gateway here and opening the designer. It'll prompt me for a username and password in a couple seconds here once the designer finishes launching. And the way the MQTT engine is set up in Ignition, anything that is being published to that data broker will be brought into Ignition, and you'll see kind of the structure that it, the tag structure that it makes within Ignition. So there'll be a entirely separate tag provider in Ignition for the MQTT engine, and I'll be able to browse to the specific topic path that we're publishing the heating temperature on. So here is my login. Go ahead and log in with my gateway credentials. And I am going to make a new project. I will just give it the name of webinar and leave everything else as default. Again, I'm not going to go through and normally change the identity provider and set up different users and restrict access or give certain users higher privileges, that type of thing. But for demonstration purposes, not going to worry about that today. So we'll load into the designer here, and we'll see all the tools that Ignition has at its disposal. And first thing I'll do is I'll navigate to that MQTT tag that's coming in via the engine. And then I'll make a new perspective screen as well, and to utilize that tag. So just going through here and starting the different modules, you have the vision module, perspective modules, the two visualization packages. Vision, of course, being the older of the two, and perspective being HTML5 based. And here we are in the Ignition Designer. So I can again go to my tag browser here and navigate to my MQTT engine. And while we wait for that to load in, okay, there it is. So I can go to my edge nodes here, and I have that Ectobox group, Pittsburgh, the bottling line, and here's Kep server and that Siemens tag that HiByte is publishing. And I can see the value change in real time here. So now I'll right click on perspective, or expand perspective rather, right click on views, make a new view, and again I'll just call it webinar, and I'll leave it as a coordinate container and just a default URL. We'll get a blank page here, and I will be using this moving analog indicator perspective component here. So I'll go ahead and drag that over and drop it onto the screen. This is a nice component. It lets you set a minimum, a maximum, a value to move the shaded blue areas like your alarm limits, and of course the arrow indicating a set point. So here's all my properties for that on the right. I can go ahead and link my process value to a specific tag, and I can use the browse feature here, and I can go to all providers in my MQTT engine, and I have that same tag path that I showed over in the tag browser. So navigate all the way down to my heating temperature. I can hit apply. You can see a preview of it updating here, and we can actually see that this analog indicator update in real time. And I'll go ahead and modify my min and max so it makes a little bit more sense, because we're going all the way up to the 300 here on the heater. Desired high I'll modify as well. And alarm I'll put at 310. So we'll be cycling through that blue range. That's our desired range, and then as new values are being brought in and published, you can see them update in real time. And this is just one of many components that Ignition has to offer. You can build entire systems at Ignition utilizing many different features. This is just one example of what you can do. If you remember back when we were looking at the PLC tags, I had like a set point value and a fail limit that we can also bring in and link to the same component. And of course, all of this data, as we shown earlier, is being historized in Canary, so we can go, this is a real-time view that's updated constantly, but if for some reason the heater's having issues, we can go back in Canary and see what the temperature was doing when those issues occurred. So just a quick little demonstration on getting data into Ignition.
Okay, so what we've gone through as a quick review is that we have a PLC running the bottling line capper station with a PLC, a Siemens S7-1200. We've connected the Kepware Kep Server EX software to the PLC via OPC UA in this instance, and then used HiByte to connect to Kepware to pull the data again via an OPC connection, and then with HiByte created another connection to push the data out to, or to create the tunnel, if you will, to push the data out to HiveMQ. Then from there, Frank created a flow to get the data through HiByte from Kepware into HiveMQ. Then set up Canary to be able to subscribe to that data from HiveMQ via MQTT Sparkplug B. Data was stored in the historian, and then he very quickly set up a pen chart in the Axiom visualization tool to be able to display that data, and then showed some of the other reporting capabilities as well. And then with Ignition, the idea is that we can then do the same kind of thing, set up the Ignition engine to connect to MQTT Sparkplug-B and HiveMQ and the MQTT data broker, pull the data in, and then open up a perspective screen to be able to add a symbol and then connect that symbol to a tag and display some data, some very useful, valuable data in Ignition. So we'll call it a wrap for this webinar. I really appreciate everybody's patience through a couple of the challenges we had technically. This has been a great webinar. We will be putting out an updated version of the recording, and I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your thanks as well.
Thanks,
Take care,
everyone.
everybody.